playing up here and over there. I feel like everybody's way back there, so if I do a little bit of ranting and raving and talking a little bit loud, you'll understand that that's why, right? This is yes.
Yes, dear.
Okay, so today is Memorial Day, and I'm sure that most of you are aware of that. I guess tomorrow's Memorial Day. Today's Memorial Day weekend. Tomorrow's Memorial Day. I'm sure most of you are aware of that because in our society today we have built a whole culture around it. It seems like Memorial Day is always right at the very end of the school year for our teachers who are very excited by that, and the students who are somewhat excited by that, and the parents who are not excited by that at all. But we also have a long weekend. And so traditionally, this is the time that all highway patrolmen are out. And by the way, if you didn't know, in Texas, they have declared that this weekend, they are particularly, through tomorrow, particularly paying attention to seat belts. So if you don't want to be stopped, make sure you have your seat belts on, and that is for your own good. But it's also the unofficial start of summer. Scientifically, summertime starts June 21st, but just in general, for our way of looking at and viewing the world, it starts on Memorial Day. And so when we think about Memorial Day, to a whole lot of us, there are many things that come to mind that are about, well, everything except Memorial Day. And so I wanted to take a little bit of time this morning and just talk about memorials and Memorial Day. Did you know that, well, Memorial Day within our nation was originally established not to commemorate all the veterans. Did you know that? It was originally Remembrance Day. And Remembrance Day was established primarily in the South to remember Confederate soldiers that were killed during the Civil War. Now, if you knew that, go ahead and do this. And a couple did, a lot didn't, but I've always found it interesting that, well, the idea of remembering Confederate soldiers that died during the Civil War was the traditional way that Memorial Day got started. It was the way of honoring people who had died in vain. And they died in vain because the war that they fought was lost, and many and most would argue that the cause was unjust. And yet, because they paid the ultimate price and sacrificed their very lives for what they believed in, they were remembered and they were esteemed. And it started at a time when most of the time graveyards or cemeteries, depending, were situated next to church houses. And so traditionally, immediately following church service, people would file out from the church service and go immediately next door into the cemetery or graveyard where they would pay their respects and decorate their graves to remember those who were fallen. And so as you look at the history of Memorial Day in this country, it comes to mind that, well, originally it was a lot more solemn and somber than it is now. And so that goes hand in hand a whole lot with what the idea of memorials and remembrances are. You know, we find monuments and we find memorials all over our country. Did you know that? If you've ever been to Washington, D.C., everywhere you look is a memorial or a monument. We have right there in D.C., these are some that I found. The Washington Monument, the Lincoln, Jefferson, Roosevelt, Garfield, Wilson, Jackson, World War I, World War II, Vietnam, Korea, fallen police officers, Arlington National Cemetery, the Tomb of the Unknown Soldiers, the African American Civil War soldiers, and many, many, many more. And if you've ever visited those places, some of them, like the Washington Monument, you stand there, and as you look at this larger list, you kind of feel a sense of majesty and awe. But as you stand in Arlington National Cemetery and you look around, it's amazing that a place that large and a city with that many people can be that quiet. As you look out across, and every direction you look, there is a perfectly lined up row of headstones, most of them in the form of crosses, some in the Star of David, and some others mixed in as well. And as you stand there, you get a sense of the purpose with which the people that are buried there served their country and gave their lives, the solemnity of the place. When you look around, it's not only in our nation's capital, but right here in the state of Texas, we have monuments and memorials such as the Alamo, the San Jacinto, the Tejano, the Texas Cowboys, the Big Man Veterans, the heroes of the Alamo, the Confederate soldiers, the Philosopher's Rock, and many more. Did you know that even within Reeves County, we have memorials and monuments? Would you believe me if I told you there are 24 official memorials and monuments in Reeves County? Now, I see some of you looking puzzled, and some of you looking bored, and some of you going, well, that's really interesting. But there are 24 officially recognized memorials and monuments within Reeves County, including the American Legion Memorial in Balleray, the Corporal Larry A. Bradley Memorial in Balleray. Anybody know who Corporal Larry A. Bradley was? I see one head body. Veterans of the United States, Red Bluff Dam, Immigrants Crossing, and the George R. Reeves, for whom Reeves County was named. So, as you look, you're saying, so what? But of those that I just listed, from the nation's capital to Reeves County, and all of those are official monuments or memorials to commemorate a person or an event, how many of them were totally unfamiliar? How many of them were some that you possibly had heard about in passing, but you don't really know what they represent? And then how many of them could you tell the whole history of and what they're about? You see, I remember as a kid growing up, Memorial Day around our family was a very, well, it was a somber time because I had many uncles who had served in World War II. I had many family members who traditionally had served all the way back in World War I and even in the Civil War. And so every year, come Memorial Day, the family would get together and everyone would go out in groups to all the cemeteries to decorate all the graves. But you remember, besides me, do you remember anyone else what you would get and put on your lapel or maybe in your hat? If I said a little forget-me-not. Anybody else in here remember the forget-me-nots that were sold by the American Legion? And they were a little flower. Now, depending on what point in time you're talking about, some of them were made out of cloth, some were made out of paper, but it was a red flower with a black middle and a green stem. And you know why? If you do, go ahead and do this. It was to commemorate from World War I the soldiers who had died in the poppy fields in the trenches. And those little flowers were the poppies. And there's even a poem written about it in Flanders fields where poppies grow. And you can go home and read that poem if you wanted to. And it would be a solemn opportunity to educate ourselves about the sacrifices that were made so that we could be free, as well as the promise of freedom that comes with it, and a chance to remember everything that was done for us. So you see, that is in essence what Memorial Day is about, because freedom is not free. It has cost people throughout history their lives so that we could sit here today, so that we could not be oppressed today. And so, for those of you who have served in the military or in other capacities, thank you. But we don't come to church today to worship the men and the women who have served and even given their lives. But it's interesting when you look up in the dictionary, memorial, it says that it is serving to preserve remembrance. It's a commemorative of or relating to memory. And I don't know if you caught the word remembrance in there, but if you look at the front of this table up here, the words of Jesus, when he spoke, and he said, "This do in remembrance of me." You see, the Lord's Supper, it is a commemorative event. It's also noted that it is a time of solemnity. A monument is denoted as a burial vault, a written legal document or record, a lasting evidence, reminder, or example of someone or something notable or great. A distinguished person, a memorial stone, or a building erected in remembrance to a person or event. And in archaic, it is an identifying mark or a carved statue, even an effigy. And so we see that traditionally there have been many points and purposes and ways of commemorating and remembering sacrifices that were made throughout time that affect history and affect people and affect lives. But why? And what are they for? But again, according to Google, here's what it says. Memorial Day is a federal holiday in the U.S. that honors and remembers the men and women who died while serving in the armed forces. It is observed on the last Monday of May, and it's a day of remembrance and reflection, not celebration. The observance, people often visit cemeteries, place flags on graves, and participate in memorial services or parades. A national moment of silence is observed at 3 p.m. local time to honor the fallen. While remembrance is the primary purpose, Memorial Day weekend has also become a time for family gatherings and the unofficial start of summer. In other words, Memorial Day is a time of reflection and education. Now, let me say that again. It's a time of reflection to remember what has been done, the price that has been paid for us, but also a time of education. So that when the people who don't know, the young people, the children ask, what's that flower for? What's the forget-me-not? What do we go to the cemetery for? Well, to remember those who paid the price. Why are the flags all being flown all over town? Because freedom is not free. And when we come together, brothers and sisters, we also are given an opportunity to have a memorial feast. A solemn time to remember and to commemorate, to learn, to reflect, and to educate what has been done for us. The price that was paid for you and for me, because freedom indeed is not free. And our freedom from the penalty for our sins and the penalty of hell came at a terrible cost. And we need to remember that. So, from a biblical perspective, we need to understand that throughout the Bible there are many, many different markers and times that the people were told to remember what had happened and what was going on. 1 Samuel chapter 3. The men of Israel rushed out of Mizpah, pursued the Philistines, slaughtering them along the way to a point below Beth-kar. Then Samuel took a stone and set it up between Mizpah and Shin, and he named it Ebenezer, saying, "Thus far the Lord has helped us." So the Philistines were subdued, and they stopped invading Israel's history, and throughout Samuel's lifetime, the hand of the Lord was against the Philistines. You see through 1 Samuel chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, they had been slaves to the Philistines. They had been an oppressed people who were under the thumb of a foreign ruler who, well, kept them from prospering. But by God's deliverance, they were set free from that slavery. And they were led to a time of prosperity that we eventually wind up at the time of the kings, Saul and David and Solomon. And they set up a stone to remember, and it said, whenever somebody asked, What is that stone for? You're to tell them, thus far has the Lord helped us. And today, I'm going to point to this and I'm going to say, when we celebrate this feast, we're to remember, thus far has the Lord helped us. Because you see, Romans chapter 3 says, every one of us, every last one of us had committed a sin that separated us from God. And Romans 6:23 says that because that sin that we committed separated us from God, what we deserved was death and hell and judgment and condemnation. But this far has the Lord helped us. God sent His Son to take our place, to set us free from the penalty that we earn, so that we could have a relationship with Him. Not just in passing, but for all of eternity. So Jacob took a stone and he set it up as a pillar, and he said to his relatives, this is in the book of Genesis, gather some stones. So they took rocks and they piled them up in a heap, and there they ate by the heap. And Laban called it Jagar Sahuda, but Jacob called it Gilead. Laban said, this heap is a witness between you and me today. This is why it was called Gilead. It was also called Mizpah, because he said, may the Lord keep watch between you and me when we are away from each other. You see, this is a chance to remember the fellowship, the unity that we have with God, not because we earn